Yo, in a previous video, I provided a broad strokes picture of systemic natural bias that affects our perception of nutrition across research, education, and government. Today, I'd like to dive into concrete examples of bias within research to look out for when learning more about nutrition. That said, let's just jump right into it. The first application of bias is in the misapplication of randomized control trials. But first, what is an RCT? Randomized control trials are highly controlled environments where scientists divide subjects into two groups, where all variables are kept the exact same, or controlled, and observe the different outcomes between the two groups when applying a special treatment to one of them. Within the scientific community, randomized control trials are highly regarded as the gold standard for studying cause and effect relationships due to their controlled nature. These studies have a significant impact on clinical guidelines and patient care and thus receive substantial funding. Now, this is all well and good, but the heart of the danger lies in the bridge between causation determined by RCTs and their application in real life. The highly controlled and simulated conditions of RCTs often do not directly translate into real life. As a simplistic example, applying the conclusions from an RCT involving rats to human beings involves a giant set of assumptions. They're completely different species. On the other hand, observational studies which lack controlled variables and involve observing the effects of variables without controlling the population are often dismissed as fishing expeditions. And this is partially because these studies frequently rely on self-reporting and introducing potential participant bias. However, observational studies are extremely valuable for establishing correlations and generating leads. Ironically, the results of these studies tend to have more relevance to real-world scenarios as the observations are typically done in natural environments. The next source of bias in research is funding bias. Research studies require resources for funding, and special interest stakeholders with money-lined pockets can tip the scales in their favor by shaping major research topics of interest and disinterest, and thereby controlling how research is interpreted by the public. Research papers are generally presented to folks in the context of selling a specific product, service, or industry. Besides ignoring studies or portions of studies that don't provide positive media coverage, organizations can present research in a way that is misleading or downright wrong. And to see an example of this, we need to look no further than the dairy industry. We're all familiar with the age-old saying, drink your milk for stronger bones. This statement was based on two facts. The first is milk contains calcium, and the second is calcium improves bone mineral density. While these two statements are individually true, an overwhelming amount of research points to weaker bones and increased incidence of bone fractures in those who drink more milk. To get to the bottom of why, here are three additional statements that can help paint a bigger picture. Number one, the body barely absorbs calcium from pasteurized milk. Number two, animal proteins acidify the blood's pH. And number three, calcium stored in bones is an acid neutralizer. The net effect has consistently led to decreased calcium in bones and thus weaker bones. At this point, it's worth pointing out that there are plenty of alternative sources of calcium that are seldom mentioned, including beans, tofu, kale, collard greens, and broccoli. And to make matters worse, fact-checking is extremely difficult. For most people, of which I include myself, research papers can be extremely hard to read and difficult to access in the first place. And even worse than that, papers are often filled with industry-specific jargon or are behind paywalls. Finally, I would like to address the absurdity that is surrounding additives and supplements. Food additives are substances added to food to enhance safety, freshness, taste, texture, or appearance of food. In the United States alone, over 10,000 food additives are used, with 60% of purchased food containing at least one. Many of these chemicals have been banned in other countries but continue to be used in American food supply due to insufficient conclusive research on their detrimental effects. Now, why do I use air quotes? With the massive amount of additives in our food, hundreds of new additives developed every year, lack of regulation, and the significant resource requirements to prove even one chemical is detrimental to our health conclusively, the scales are so imbalanced that to rely on research to ban chemicals is laughable at best. Furthermore, in the realm of supplements, FDA approval is not required at all, and the burden of proof lies solely with the selling organization. Unfortunately, the bar for evidence is often set so low especially considering that it is the seller who is responsible for providing the evidence to support their own product. Additionally, there are approximately 29,000 supplements available to consumers, with an average of 1,000 new supplements introduced every year. It's important to ask ourselves a few questions. Who else, besides the sellers, is going to investigate these supplements? With what money and from whom? That said, thank you all for listening and keeping an open mind to what I have to say today. Research has unfortunately turned into a modern-day buzzword, and I encourage you all to stay curious and critical of quick hacks or all other pieces of dubious but actionable health information in your immediate environment that point to research. Please remember to bear in mind the effects of misinterpreting RCTs, funding bias, and one-sided regulation requirements when assessing health trends and products themselves. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.